Whether you're looking to upgrade your kit lens, you're moving into more professional pet photography and you're wondering if your current gear is up to the job, or you're just looking for a change in scenery, let's talk all about lenses for pet photography. What lens you should get is actually my most popular blog post, so it's obviously a question that's on a lot of people's minds. So we're going to touch on the most important things to consider when you're looking at different lenses for pet photography, what you might want to think about, whether brands really matter, and all of that good stuff. Make sure you stick around to the end because, as always, I'm saving the best stuff till last, where I will tell you what my go-to lens is for both my personal pet photography and the lens that I use for 99% of the photos that I do with my clients. First of all, is your lens actually that important, really? The short answer is absolutely, and in fact, it might be more important than the camera that you use. Most people come onto my channel, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or here, and say, great photo, what camera do you use? Where I think actually the more relevant question is, what lens are you using? Because you can put an old camera with a new high quality lens, and the quality of those photos will be a million times better than if I take my new camera, my expensive professional camera, and put a cheap crappy kit lens on it. Now obviously with the old Sony photos there is a little bit more noise there, but that's to be expected. It is a crop camera and it is older and cheaper, but you can't deny that the quality in the two photos there is miles apart, and that is purely because of the lens. So the lens has a huge amount to do with how your photos turn out, how much light can get into your camera, the general look of the photo, whether the background is super creamy and blurry or whether you're going to see everything in crazy detail. So let's talk a couple of things about lenses in general. There's two types of lenses that you can find. There are zoom lenses, which zoom in and out, or you can get a prime lens. These ones do not zoom, so if you want to show more or less of the scene, if you want to get closer or further away from the dog, you need to physically move yourself in order for that to happen. And a lot of the answers to questions like what camera is best, what lens is best, it depends. It depends on you, it depends on what you're taking photos of, what you like to do, what your main photography style or type is, as to what's going to be better for you. In general, prime lenses do tend to be a little bit sharper. They tend to come in a wider maximum aperture. Most zoom lenses maximum aperture tends to be f2.8 unless you want to spend an incredible amount of money. That basically means that you cannot let in as much light with a zoom lens of f2.8 than you can with a prime lens at f1.8. If your aperture at f1.8 is like this, and your aperture at f2.8 is like this, you're missing that extra bit of light. So for me personally, where I do a lot of photos in the forest, a prime lens at f1.8 is ideal because I need that extra light so that I can keep my ISO nice and low. If you have no idea about any of these topics and terms, if you're not sure what aperture is, you're not sure what ISO is, you're not sure what that has to do with numbers and backgrounds and light, make sure you check out my learning journey. I have a whole course in there all about learning your camera, about depth of field, that's how blurry the background is, about the exposure triangle, and basically just helping you get a hang of really being in control of your camera. So if any of this is like, oh my god, she's throwing all of these terms at me, definitely make sure you check out the learning journey because that course is included as part of the membership for all members, so you really can't go wrong with that. Anyways, continuing on, a zoom lens might be the best option for you if you take photos at a lot of agility competitions, herding competitions, disc dogs, where you need to be able to have that flexibility to zoom in and out because the dogs are moving around or they're less predictable, they're playing, they're running, whatever it is, and you can't be getting up and moving back and forth, and you don't want to be cropping in the photo in Photoshop or whatever. So that is something to consider, is the type of photo that you're going to be taking. The next really important thing to talk about is aperture. I've mentioned it already. A smaller number means a wider aperture. That means more light is getting into your lens. You can actually see what the maximum aperture of your lens is by having a look at the numbers on the side of the lens. So this one says FE 1.8. That means it's a 1.8 maximum aperture. The widest this aperture can go is f1.8, and that is pretty good. That is going to let in a nice amount of light if I'm in the woods, and I shouldn't have to have my ISO too crazy. If your lens says something like 4.5 to 6.3, that's not necessarily ideal, especially if you want to take photos on an overcast day or in the woods or anywhere where it isn't bright and sunny. And I personally don't take photos in bright and sunny conditions, so those kinds of lenses would not be ideal for me at all, because your maximum aperture is 4.5 if it's zoomed out and 6.3 if it's zoomed in. That means you are missing out on so much light. Here is some examples I took when I was making an aperture lesson, and if you check out the settings here, you're going to be able to see that the ISO, which is the only other setting I changed from when we had f1.8 to f6.3 or f7, whatever it is going to be way higher. So that is the compromise that you're going to have to make if you have a lens with an f number that is above 2.8. So that is really something to consider, especially if you're shopping for new lenses. You really want to look for something with an f number of f2.8 or a smaller number that's going to let in more light. f2 is fine, f1.4 is great, f1.8 also great as well. So the next question is brands. What brand should I get? What about Sigma? What about Samyang? What about a native lens, a Sony for my Sony, a Canon for my Canon, Nikon for my Nikon? Personally, I don't feel that it actually matters all that much. Yes, there are some quality differences between some lenses. Some lenses are going to need an adapter to work on your camera. That really depends on your camera and the lens that you're looking at. So do keep that in mind. I cannot tell you every camera that requires an adapter with every lens right now. That's something that you can pretty easily do with a little bit of research, but that is something to keep in mind. Some lenses are going to be slower. I would say a Samyang 135 will be slower than a Sony 135 on a Sony body. Native glass tends to be a little bit faster and a little bit sharper, not always, but in general. There are plenty of people on YouTube who get sent lenses to review. That is their job. That is what they're paid for. These are all lenses that I've bought. If somebody wants to start sending me lenses to review them, I can definitely do that. But until that point, I have not personally tried every single lens brand or lens model, so I cannot tell you this one for sure is better than this one. And again, I still think it comes down to personal preference. Some people love their Sigma 135, some people will die by their Sony. Often it just comes down to budget. I will say though, with lenses, that you do usually get what you pay for, and if you have found a super cheap lens somewhere, I would question why. The last thing to consider is, of course, the focal length. So how much of the scene is going to be included in the photo? Wide angle lenses are great for things like landscapes, where you want to show more of the scene and more of the stuff going on. Your phone, for example, is a wide angle lens. Then you get into your mid-range lens. I'm going to show you some examples of all of these in just a second. You get into your mid-range lenses like your 35 millimeters to 70 millimeter kind of range. Basically, it looks like how our eye sees the world at about 50 millimeters. It's fine. It's nothing exciting. The majority of my members in the learning journey who start with a 50 millimeter very quickly want to upgrade and get something different. From 85 millimeters up, you're looking at telephoto, and that is what you'll find that the majority of pet photographers use for their photo shoots, for their clients, for themselves, whatever it is. I would say that the 105 millimeter f1.4, the 135 millimeter, and the 70 to 200 millimeter 2.8 are the three most popular lenses amongst professionals. I also like an 85. This is my 85. It's little, it's small, it's not the most expensive lens in the world, and it has pretty good results. So if you are looking at getting your first kind of not kit lens, the 85 millimeter f1.8 could be a really nice option for you to start with. Let's have a look at a couple of examples of different focal lengths, and then I will let you know which lens is my favorite. If you're finding this useful so far, do remember to like and subscribe. Comment me below if you have any questions about lenses, and I will do my best, as somebody who's not been sent any lenses, to answer you. Okay, let's have a look first at some wide angle photos. So these are ones that are taken with like a 24 millimeter. So with the 24, you get sort of a bit of a bobblehead look. So, you know, you get this sort of look here. I think it is great for pets and people's photos. It's great for looking down on a dog. I use it indoors for my product photography, and you can see there's a bit of distortion here. His paw looks big, his little face looks big, but that is mostly what I use the 24 millimeter for. This photo as well is obviously taken with a wide angle lens. You can see it 28 millimeters on a crop body, so it would have been probably around 35 millimeter focal length there. This one as well, taken with at 35 millimeters. So these are some photos I was just taking, playing around with my new wide angle lens that I got. So these are 14 millimeters, which is very wide angle, and you can see the kind of effect you're getting with these photos. These haven't been edited. I was just playing around to see the effects of them. And again, a little Frenchie with the wide angle, getting that real bobblehead kind of look with this lens. So that is how your wide angle lens looks. Let's have a look and see if we have any at 50 millimeters. I don't currently own a 50 millimeter lens, so I definitely don't have a lot of photos at that focal length, but I'm sure I have some, so let's have a look. So these couple were taken with the 50 millimeter down in this waterfall, and I actually liked it a bit because the wider angles were just too wide and the 85 was just too compressed. So actually this can be a nice little in-between lens sometimes. It's a fine lens. I feel like there's nothing really very exciting about a 50 millimeter lens, but obviously I was taking some landscape photos with it on this particular day, which is an interesting choice, but I think I was just exploring using another lens for once because I think I borrowed it, and it's not a lens that I use particularly often, but here you go. It's fine. It's definitely not a bad lens. It's not the worst lens, and it doesn't always give you that pretty smooth, soft and creamy background. You'll get more of this kind of busy bokeh in the background instead of that smooth look that you would get with a narrower telephoto lens. So let's have a look now at some 85 millimeter examples. A lot of my photos are taken with the 85 millimeter. As you can see here, as I'm scrolling through, there are a lot of different photos. Again, like how blurry the background is will depend on how close you are to the dog, how far away the background is from the dog, and all of that good stuff. But you can kind of get an idea of how the 85 millimeter looks. A lot of my really well-known photos have been taken with the 85 millimeter. It is a really good lens to go for a walk in the woods with because it is small and light and still gives you a nice portrait-y feel, a nice blurry background. It is pretty sharp, you know, like these ones are all taken with the 85. So definitely a good lens, and like I said, it's not the most expensive lens and it is pretty good quality. It does a pretty good job. So don't discount the 85 millimeter lens. I always joke that I should open an 85 millimeter lens shop because so many of my members in the learning journey buy an 85 millimeter lens when they first join, because I just think it's a nice, simple lens for portraits. And I just think you can't really go too wrong when it comes to an 85 millimeter. I mean, these are all 85 millimeters and these are still some of my favorite photos that I've ever taken. So it's definitely a good one. And now, of course, if you have a look at the numbers here, these are the photos that are all on my hard drive. We have 11,000 photos with the 85 millimeter, and of course, my absolute favorite with nearly 20,000 photos in my big hard drive here is, of course, the 135mm f1.8 GM lens from Sony. This is my favorite. This is my baby. This one almost never leaves my camera. It's very unusual that it's currently off my camera, but this is the one that I love, and this is the one that I do most of my client work with. You always get these beautiful, soft, blurry backgrounds. Again, a lot of my well-known photos were taken with this lens, and especially recently, I've definitely moved back to this lens, and I'm doing a lot with it. You still don't always get that creamy background. It depends on what's going on in the background, where the dog is, how close the background is, how close you are to the dog, but I do love this lens. I love the look it gives. I love how sharp it is, and for me, it's my favorite for pet photography. Even if if I have to be a little bit further away from the dog, that's never really a problem for me. So sort of get the idea. There's the unedited version. So you can see here the background hasn't really had much done to it. It is just like that out of camera. So that is my favorite lens, the 135. You can find generally on my Instagram, I put the lens that I use in the caption, so you can definitely check that out. But I really love a 135, especially if you're not afraid of being a little bit further away from the dog. This gives you really lovely results, really pretty backgrounds, and again you can see I haven't touched that background at all. That's just how it is straight out of camera. So I hope you found this interesting, and I hope it has helped you guide you to what lens you're going to choose next. As always, if you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear them in the comments below. Please let me know what else you'd like to see videos on, and I will see you next time.